Good morning. My name is Farid Mistry, and I'm delighted to introduce a very special session today where we shine the spotlight on Jamsetji Tata. The W.Z.C.C. purpose is to provide an opportunity for those who seek to create intellectual, economic, and social value beyond resources control and maximize the nexus between the three values for sustainable development for the good of the Zarathustra and other communities. This is a very important notion that WZCC is open to all who wish to contribute to intellectual, economic, and social value, and all who wish to promote the sustainable development of the Zarathustra and other communities. The W.Z.C.C. spotlight rationale is the following. We wish to shine the spotlight on people and their achievements and relate these to the creation of intellectual, economic, and social value, which is the mantra or the purpose of the W.Z.C.C. Today is a very special event. We have Gopalakrishnan and Harish Bhat, who wrote a book titled Jamsetji Tata, and they are going to spotlight Jamsetji to highlight in the context of the W.Z.C.C. mission, Jamsetji the person and his achievements. The spotlight moderator is Percy Master, the president of the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce. So Percy, over to you.
Thank you, Farooq. May I request everybody to have a 1 minute silence in memory of our late Mr. Ratan Tata, please. Thank you, everybody. We have heard a lot about Mr. Ratan Tata. Several every day we hear of condolence meetings being conducted all over the place. And ever since he has passed away, there has been a clamor to do something in his memory due to the extraordinary work that he did. But so I will not elaborate on all that. However, one incident that really stands out is that as soon as the news channels announced the sad passing away of Mr. Ratan Tata, the whole of India came to a standstill. It was close to midnight. Due to the Navratri festival, Garba and Dandiyaras and all other events were in full swing throughout India. Everything was stopped and a few minutes of prayers and silence was observed. In my lifetime, I have never seen anything like this in our country, and that has been more than 75 years. The love and affection that was shown by the general public thereafter was something which has to be seen to be believed. There was no pushing, no shouting, only a very dignified homage to a great leader and a kind soul. When Mr. Ratan Tata retired, a journalist congratulated him in expanding the Tata Group to unforeseen levels and made it a global group. He had this to answer: I am an ordinary man in an extraordinary company. I have not made it what it is today. It has made me what I am today. And finally, a few years back, the press asked him, Sir, now that you have retired, how would you like to be remembered? He had this to say: I would like to be remembered as a person who made a difference, not anything more, not anything less. And that is how I think we should remember him. These are profound words from a very human and extraordinary man who touched the very heart of each and every citizen of India and, in fact, the world. It will be futile to do anything in his memory. It would not be enough as it is. He will not want it either. He has made a difference in our lives, and that is enough for him. So today's interview of the two iconic Tata directors is timely, and let the audience learn what was the philosophy of Jamsetji Tata and the founder of the Tata Group. So let me welcome Mr. R Gopalakrishnan, popularly known as Gopal. Gopal served Unilever for 31 years and then Tata Group for 18 years. In his third career as an author, this book counts as his 20th. He advocates for companies that are she for sustainable, human, and enlightened. This book concerns India's leading she enterprise, the Tata Group, which has remained in India's list of top companies for over 150 years. I would also like to introduce Mr. Harish Bhat, who served Tata Group right through his career. Harish Bhat is an avid marketer and a best-selling author. This is his 7th book. Harish has worked with the Tata Group for over 35 years. He is a graduate of BITS Pilani and IIM Ahmedabad. In 2022 and 23, Forbes listed him as one of the top 10 most influential chief marketing officers in the world. Harish lives in Bangalore with his family. So with these few words, let me welcome Gopal and Harish to this spotlight today.
Thank
We
you.
are all delighted to have you with us for an informal chat that I'm sure all our listeners today will enjoy. So let me start with you, Gopal. Can you explain your passion for writing books and what inspired you to do so?
Okay. Well, I was going to retire someday, and I knew that well ahead of my retirement. And I recall my father's advice when he was still alive, saying, if you want to do something after your retirement, start doing it before. It's like when you run with the train before you jump into a running train. He says, don't wait till you're retired, because then you start feeling sleepy. And the idea of writing books came to my mind because I had created a metaphor in my head that all of us, without exception, are privileged to be earning some money to be comfortable and achieve some success in your profession. But we're equally privileged to be earning a lot of knowledge from experience. The knowledge from experience gets in like 2 kilos of wheat from the farm into the silo. Every year that goes by, some learning you had about acquisitions, about being nice to people, about being humble as a leader, etc. And over 30, 40 years of your career, it becomes a large silo. But as you know, a silo of wheat is of no use to a hungry man. There are a lot of hungry people, youngsters, students, other professionals, who would love to have the benefit of your experience, but not if you point them to a silo which contains 2 tons of wheat. So it is important that people like us, senior citizens, should be able to fractionate 2 kilos at a time, make atta out of it, add some spices, and serve out naan or paratha or rumali roti or croissant, so that the same wheat can be converted into interesting forms suitable to that particular audience. And that's what motivated me to write my books. I am no more experienced than anybody else. I've worked in 2 companies, but that doesn't mean I've learned everything. There are people who worked in other companies. There are people who've come up the tough way, people who've had a shock in their life or career and they've overcome it. All of those are experiences which are worth sharing because somebody somewhere is benefiting from it. And the thought that everybody doesn't have to benefit millions of people, but if all of us can share some experiences with some people, society will be better. That's what caused me to write books which are all based, all 20 books, on my personal experiences and what I learned from it. Hopefully, given in a form which is digestible to my target audience. And the
Thank
Jamsetji
you.
book is in that same sequence.
Thank you, Gopal. But I would just like a little follow-up on that. You have written 20 books so far. So can you please briefly tell us what was the essence in writing all these 20 books? Was there a similar type of message or maybe something else you wanted to convey?
No, the common feature of all the 20 books is that A, they came out of my own experience, and B, they were lessons of life. They just happened to be set on a platform of business and enterprise. If an army general wrote it, it would be set in the platform of battle or war or strategy. If an academic professor wrote it, it would be set in the context of teaching young people, motivating them. So the first book was on intuition, human intuition. Where does rationality stop and where does intuition begin? The second book, I'm just taking as an example, I won't go through all the 20 for those who are worried about it.
Yeah.
The second book is about how we create self-awareness. Because our greatest enemy, as Swami Vivekananda said, is not outside us but within us. The third book was, we tend to diss young people as saying, Aajkal ke bacche. But actually, those young people are as different from us as we were from our parents, and my parents were from their grandparents. So how can we see and talk to young people? So that was the third book, and so on and so forth, until Jamsetji Tata book, which of course came out of my inspiration, that how could a guy create a company which has a philosophy for 150 years, not 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, pass it down through 7 generations, be on top of the world, and create an institution, not a company, which people respect but also love. It's very difficult to love a company. If you went to California and said, can you love Apple? You can love Apple's products, but to love Steve Jobs is not easy. So it's a very rare Eastern orthodoxy, if I may use the word, that you can love a company. And I can tell you, if the discussion calls for it, occasions when Tata's got into quote unquote trouble with some politician whom we couldn't pay or whatever, and people actually felt sorry for Tata, saying, "Itne bhale manus ko aisa nahi hona chahiye." And the crest that is there in the Tata offices, Huma Hukta Khorsta, is something that Tata practiced. And that is what caused Harish and me to collaborate in the writing of this book.
Thank you, Gopal, for that lovely description. Harish, I would like you to ask you one question also. You have been with Tata Group for almost 35 years now, and in fact, your whole career has been with the Tatas. You have also written 7 books, and you have been recognized as a marketing genius and a best-selling author. What stirred you? What passion you had to write all these books?
So, Percy, there are 3 things that I am very passionate about. I'm very passionate about the Tata Group. This has been my professional home ever since I left college 37 years ago. The Tata Group has been a wonderful place, a very inspiring place to work in. I have learned a lot, but I've also been inspired by what I've seen and heard. I joined the group in 1987 when Mr. J.R.D. Tata was the chairman. Then, of course, in 1991, Mr. Ratan Tata took over as the chairman, and I've been with the group ever since. My most recent assignment as brand custodian of Tata Sons, I was reporting to Mr. Chandrasekharan, the current chairman of the Tata Group. So one area of my passion and inspiration is the Tata. The other area of my passion and inspiration is marketing. I've been a marketer through my life. I've helped build some good brands for the Tata Group, and I think I have garnered a wealth of experience in the marketing side as well. The third thing, Percy, is I'm very passionate about storytelling and writing. I love the written word. I love storytelling. And so, at the junction of these three things, the Tata Group, marketing, and writing, I thought if there is any way I can contribute to the world around me, that would be the best way of giving back. And writing books and writing articles on these subjects, on the history of the Tata Group, on marketing, on the, I used to sell tea and coffee in my first role. So I've written a book of fiction about coffee, which I'm very interested in. So anything that comes at the junction of these three things, Percy, is what inspires me to write. And that's why I've written these 7 books, and I hope to continue writing more. But on this particular book, Percy, I must mention something here. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, who is on this video call, has been my mentor on my writing voyage. And when I wrote my first book in 2012, it was called Tata Log. I had no experience in writing a book. In fact, I had no clue how to write. And I was in Titan. I was a manager in Titan those days. I wrote an email to Mr. Gopalakrishnan saying, I am very keen to write a book about the Tata Group, and can I get your guidance? I was hardly expecting to receive a response from him. He was already an executive director of Tata Sons at that time, on the boards of several companies. But in 2 or 3 days, he responded to me and he said, Harish, come across to Bombay House. Let's sit down and talk about this book. He guided me in the writing of that book. He reviewed how the book was coming along, and he eventually wrote a foreword for it. So in 2022, on my 60th birthday in November, Mr. Gopalakrishnan gave me a phone call and said, Harish, here is an idea I have for a book based on the philosophy of Jamsetji Tata. And would you be willing to co-author this book with me? So obviously I jumped with joy. I told my wife, listen, here's a call I have got from a very senior director who has been my mentor, asking me whether I'm happy to write a book. Of course, I'm happy to write a book. And that's how the collaboration started. It's been a privilege working with Mr. Gopalakrishnan and co-authoring this book with him.
Thank you, Harish. I also went through the book, which Gopal very nicely, kindly gave it to me, and I couldn't put it down. I read it right through, and the beauty of this book is that it is not an autobiography on Mr. Jamsetji Tata. It is his philosophy and how he conceptualized the group and how he helped India become an industrial nation. So all that qualities which Jamsetji had has been very well brought out in this book, and I was very glad to go through it so quickly. But let me give you a little follow-up question on that. You have been trained at IIM Ahmedabad and BITS Bilani. In fact, Forbes listed you as one of the top 10 authors for influencing marketing executives. What's inspired to author these books?
What's inspired me to author his books is somewhat similar to what Mr. Gopalakrishnan mentioned. Can I bring my experience to bear? And in distilling this experience, can I add some value to readers? When I write a book, I always bear in mind that the person reading the book should take away a few good lessons which can be used in her or his life. So that is what inspires me. That's what gives me a purpose to write. That someone will benefit from reading a book that I write. It can either be information, knowledge, entertainment, inspiration. It can be any of these. But someone will benefit, and these books will help them, will transform their lives a little bit, using the information, the knowledge, and the inspiration in these books. That is why when a reader writes to me and says, Harish, your books have helped me do A, B, or C, or your books have helped me as an entrepreneur to look at how to build my organization along the same principles that the Tata Group has followed, that is extremely gratifying, Percy, as a writer. So what inspires me to write is really, am I able to make that little bit of difference in the lives of the readers who like to read what I write?
That is a very good thing to do, because apparently the person who is reading the books should also learn from it and also absorb some of the qualities that the book brings out, which is exactly what Jamsetji Tata book also gives you, that encouragement to be a better entrepreneur, to give back to the society, and things like these qualities which are so important to be a good
person. I totally agree, and I also feel as a writer that those lessons should flow naturally to the book, through the book. They should not be forced upon the reader. The reader should imbibe those lessons naturally, and that's the way that Mr. Gopalakrishnan and I have tried to co-author this book.
Yeah, thank you very much. Gopal, can I ask you a question now? The Tata brand is the most respected brand in India. As Zoroastrians, we are undoubtedly proud of it, but Indians in general hero worship this brand. What has been the secret of this?
But our lives are such that if you aim to do something, then you don't necessarily achieve it. Just like in snooker or billiards, if you want to pot the ball, sometimes you right obliquely and you pot the ball, or in carom for that matter. The Tata brand was never dreamt about or created by anybody. And no brand marketer of the standing of Harish Bhat was involved in the last 150 years. Mr. Tata and his early successors had a philosophy which they implemented. And the philosophy was, whatever you do, it must be good for India, it must be good for the community, and third, it must be good for the shareholder. Exactly the opposite of what happens in the US. I mean, people in the US, when they listen to me, think I'm talking baloney. And probably from their point of view, that is correct. Because they think of what is good for the shareholder first. And I don't know if they think about the community or the nation. But certainly Jamsetji Tata, 150 years ago, came at it in Farsi or Arabic, writing from right to left rather than left to right. And as a result of whatever they did, there are multiple stories, and Harish is a great storyteller. They appear in the book. There are almost 24 or 30 stories in the book. They did good to society. They did good for the nation. And that built up the image of the product without anybody ever having or stating that he's trying to build the Tata brand. In fact, it's very interesting that when Jamsetji began his first enterprises, he never called them Tata. He called them Swadeshi Mills, Empress Mills, Indian Hotels. Even today, Taj is called Indian Hotels. People gave the Tata name. It is called Indian Institute of Science. But if you go to Bangalore, people will say Tata Institute of Science. If you go to Bangalore, they'll say Tata Silk Farm. But he never called it the Tata Silk Farm. It's only after Jamsetji's death in 1904 or around that time that people said, don't you think he should put his name, and we should, and he got Tata Tisco, as it came to be called, Tata Iron and Steel Company, Tata Hydro. But the early hydro companies were called Bhimpuri Hydroelectric Power Station, So as a result, and I go back to Hindu philosophy, because whether it's Zoroastrian or Hindu, they're all human philosophies. And the emphasis over here will be on humanistic philosophies. You do good karma and the brand grows. By doing good karma, the brand grew. And I think it is to the credit of Ratan Tata, back in the 90s, say 30 years ago, that he said, is this Tata a brand and is it worth anything? And just before I joined Tata's, he got it valued by whatever methods there are available. And if I remember right, the number was $350 billion, which really looks like peanuts, even at that time. I happened to join with a portfolio of things to do, one of which was the Tata brand. Harish succeeded me in that Tata brand custodian role later. And I said, this is a first step, but we must have a more organized way of valuing the Tata brand. And then we started a process which has gone on for the last 25 years. And today the Tata brand is valued at 30 billion. I want to emphasize it not because of the technique we used, but because the valuation techniques became more reliable and international. So here's a brand, probably the only brand in the world, or probably amongst a few brands in the world, which nobody set out to create. But as we say in Sanskrit, Swayambhu, it became by itself. And later on, we only learned to nurture it and take it forward. So I think it's a fantastic lesson in brand management. I have had the privilege and the pleasure, and I was always so careful. It is like going into the temple and afraid to touch the statue because you may damage it. And I said, this is something I should not damage. If I can't enhance it, at least let me not damage it. And that's how the Tata brand has come to, and it's India's most valuable brand. And I think Harish can correct me, it's probably the 30th or 35th in the top 35 or 40 in the world. Am I right?
It is the only Indian brand amongst the top 100 in the world, only Indian origin brand. And I think the global ranking was somewhere between 60 and 70 last year. I don't remember the exact number, it was 67 or 60. But it's been the global rankings have been steadily climbing, Percy. And the value of the brand finance publishes a report every year. If my memory serves me right, the valuation of the brand last year was in the region of $28 billion, very close to $30 billion.
And if I might add to what Harish just said, Percy, and in pursuance of your question, we are really lucky guys. We worked in Tata, we saw the brand and so on. But our purpose of writing the book and giving the subtitle, Powerful Lessons for Corporate Success, is India needs 2,000 Tatas. And when I use the word Tata, I don't mean they have to be as big or as powerful. It has taken 150 years, so I don't expect in 10 years. India desperately needs more Tatas, and by Tatas I mean giants of ethics and philosophy of giving back to community. Whether their size is $100 million or $1 billion, I consider all of them to be Tatas. Just like all molecules are not equal in size, they may be small or big, but molecules they are. So we are hoping that the writing of this book and other such writings that other people will do will motivate India to have a zillion Tatas.
Yeah, we hope so. Anyway, just to a little bit of a follow-up on that question. How was your experience at Tata's after your career with Unilever? Did you find any difference or was it the same?
No. Of course, there was a difference. I mean, no two sons in the same family are identical. So both were wonderful companies. Both were ethical. Both had great governance. Both had great leadership development. But that's where the similarity ends. Unilever was a very Anglo-Saxon, Greek Orthodox type thinking, and Tata was a very, very Indian company. And the difference is always brought out by the fact that, like every Indian company, in Tata's, most of the area in front of them was ambiguous and possible to interpret. And what was crystal clear was a little sliver at two ends of the circle. Whereas in the Greek way of thinking, there's a very thin line separating clarity and confusion. So American books are full of this clarity and confusion and how leaders must do it. But Indian leaders have been trained to work under highly ambiguous circumstances. And that's one of the reasons why I think some of the Indian leaders who go abroad in academics, in business, do quite so well. Because unknown to themselves, they have learned to be dealing with this vast mass of. So that was a difference. When I was in Lever, I think people were literally told, that your future as a leader depends on your ability to sort out the essentials and get to the crux of the point. I'm not saying Tatas did not want it, but they understood that it is a very confused mass and it will take some time. And in fact, the leadership of Ratan Tata, of the group, I mean, he took his own time carrying people with him because he felt that to be effective was more important than just efficient. And that's a big difference, efficiency and effectiveness. And that's a great lesson I learned. In Unilever, efficiency topped effectiveness. And it's a question of degree, I'm not saying one or the other. Right? Since you asked about the difference, whereas here, you had to be effective before you became efficient.
So I think the leadership is such that you have to carry the whole team with you. And that is most important, I think. And that is what he achieved, I think, in his career.
And when we talk of the whole team, let me just emphasize, today, as we speak, Tata has over 1 million employees. Huh?
Oh my God.
And if you add the associates like distributors, the channel partners, the vendors, you probably get, and the alumni, because the people who come to Tata don't all stay forever. You're probably talking about 4-5 million people who are affected or impacted by Tata or who impact Tata. If I multiply that by 4 or 5, to say that's the number of people in the family, there are 20 to 30 million people in this country. That's 5 times the size of Belgium. So you got
Yeah,
to look at
we
this.
are talking very big numbers here.
You're talking huge numbers, and to carry these people with you
Is a remarkable,
quite a skill. Quite a skill.
Harish, I will just ask you one more question. You have been with the Tata Group all through your career mostly. What has been your experience over all these years of service?
Yeah,
Is
so
your
Percy, it's a question that many people ask me. What has my experience been, and why have I chosen to work with the Tata Group throughout my career? And the reasons are very simple, Percy. First and foremost, the Tata Group has given me very interesting roles over my 37 years. I began my career selling Tata tea and coffee. I then sold Tanishq jewelry, marketed it. Thereafter, Titan and Fast Track and Sonata watches. And eventually, I was brand custodian. Managing the initiatives of the Tata brand. So very, very interesting assignments across 37 years of my career. The second part I would like to also say, Percy, is that the Tata Group has been a very caring employer, very, very caring employer, takes care of people very well. Certainly, it has taken care of me in tough times and in good times. I narrated to you, for instance, a little earlier, the generosity that Mr. Gopalakrishnan showed me when I was trying to write my first book, and I can. There are many, many anecdotes like that across my career, and many others will narrate similar anecdotes. So that's the second bit of the experience I've had. A very, very caring and good employer. The third thing, Percy, is when you work with the Tata Group, you feel particularly proud because you know that we are owned by the Tata Trust, and 66% of Tata Sons is owned by the Tata Trust, and therefore, through the dividends, the funds eventually flow back to society. The funds flow towards the creation of hospitals fighting cancer, or the fight against COVID-19, or so many other social initiatives, establishment of some of India's finest institutions. So you feel that there's a larger purpose to what you're doing rather than only earning profits or only building commercial brands. And that's a really good feeling to have. And fourth, and very importantly, Percy, 37 years of my career, I can put my hand on my heart and say the Tata Group has never once asked me to do something which goes against my conscience. And that ensures that you can sleep well at night. I think in today's days and times, that's well worth its weight in gold. So those are 3 or 4 facets of my experience with the Tata Group. But I have thoroughly enjoyed being part of the group. I have learned from uh, many iconic leaders of the group, and I've also done my best to contribute to the building of brands, to the building of businesses in the group.
I think every citizen in India who buys anything from Tata's also feels that he's doing some charity also along with it,
Well,
because
I think there
naturally,
is a lot of there's a lot of love for the Tata brand, Percy, and you're quite right. Mr. Gopalakrishnan has already explained that the brand was built through its ethos, and the brand was not built through some formal brand building exercise 150 years ago. The brand was built because of the philosophy of Jamsetji Tata, which comes out in this book so well. Not just the philosophy, but I would say a brand is built when that philosophy is consistent over many years. And if you take the history of the Tata Group, 156 years now, if you take every leadership generation as being about 30 years, then you're talking of the Tata Group being in its 6th generation now. And people in India, particularly, but now also in other parts of the world, have seen that that philosophy has been consistent. And consistency is one of the key factors that breeds trust in the minds of people. So it is philosophy into consistency, I think, is where the magic happens.
Harish, just a follow-up question that in spite of you holding such an important position in the group, how did you manage to take a sabbatical to deal with your passion of writing books and becoming a best-selling author in the bargain?
Percy, when I was in my full-time role with the Tata Group, I would not get time over weekdays to write, but I would take time on weekends to write. I would write every Sunday morning, and over the years I cultivated a discipline of writing 1,000 words every Sunday, becoming a columnist to a couple of newspapers. You have to submit your writings in time. I had completed 25 years in the group when I applied for a sabbatical to write my first book. And the Tata Group was kind enough to give me leave for 4 months. And I took those 4 months, went to various places, interviewed the protagonists of various stories that I put into my first book, and also sat down in the library of the Tata Management Center in Pune to do that writing. So I have not taken a sabbatical for all my books. For the first book, I did take 4 months out. The rest of the books are largely written over weekends.
So I think
I should add here, Percy, since this is the W.Z.C.C, that it was a Z called Rusi Lala, who is the inspiration for people like Harish and myself, because Rusi Lala was a journalist, and then he joined Tata. JRD invited him, and he's the one who put together the first stories called The Creation of Wealth, Beyond the Blue Mountain. And he's now dead and gone, but he was the original chronicler. And
yes, I have read his books
Tatas,
also. I have read
all of us were given a copy of Rusi's book. And we said, can there be a more modern version? Because unfortunately, Rusi is not with us anymore. And in a sense, we have taken some small little steps to follow in Rusi's large steps which went ahead of us.
So Percy, one small anecdote I should mention. When I began writing my first book, I paid Rusi Lala a visit at his house in Colaba, and he spoke with me. He also told me, Harish, writing is a challenging journey because sometimes it gets very lonely as a writer. So make sure that you keep your resolve. And my first book was dedicated to Rusi Lala. He is the original historian of the Tata Group for sure.
Okay, Gopal, one question to you. There have been many books written on Jamsetji Tata and on the Tata Group, as you rightly said. We noticed that your book is not a biography of Jamsetji Tata, but his passion in putting the Indian industry on the world map and his passion for doing business with the 10 P's, which you have very well described in your book. Can you elaborate on these 10 P's, what they really mean to the Tatas?
Let me explain the distinctiveness of what this book seeks to do compared to others, because the raw material is the same. People have written biographies or autobiographies of Tata people. So when Jamsetji Tata died in 1935, Frank Harris wrote he's a historian, an outsider meaning he was an academic, and he wrote a book which the Harish is holding up for you. That's 1933 or 35. Subsequently, there have been other books, and the latest book has come out on the Ratan Tata biography. You might have read about it in the newspapers, which has just come out, in fact, this morning. So one type of genre is the biography. The second type of genre is the company. So somebody will say how Tata Steel achieved this, or how TCS was set up, or how Indian hotels became what it has become. So I take the metaphor of a cucumber, and we've had people who sliced the cucumber horizontally and wrote people's leaders' biographies, or they wrote companies' developments. What Harish and I decided to do was to cut it longitudinally. What is it that connects all of these over 150 years? You're looking at it from a time series point of view rather than individual companies. And we got this idea. There are 2 P's which don't have stories attached to them. The opening P is, I think, philosophy, and the last 2 P's are perspectives and postscript. But there are 7 P's in between.
Yes, I know.
And the P's, I'm just giving by way of example, are things like perseverance, things like people. So there are 7 P's, which we created as 7 pillars on which the Tata emblem of Humahutta Harsta stands, which is common. So there's a philosophical permeation, and Tata is a mini India, frankly. It's got diversity. It's got multiple languages, multiple religions, all united by some ethereal force, which we call the philosophy of Tata. Just like India is held together with multiple religions, multiple languages, but held together by an invisible force, which we call Indianness. So Tata is very much a mini India, and we wanted to bring that point out. So each P covers one of the 7 characteristics that great entrepreneurs have. And examples were perseverance and people and so on and so forth. And in order not to let it become philosophical or up in the air intellectual exercise, because frankly, neither Harish nor I have pretensions of being intellectuals. We are merely soldiers who walked on the field. We provided 3 stories which illustrate perseverance, for example, or people orientation, or reviews of things. And the first story was relating to the early period, Jamsetji Tata's time. The second was more or less during JRD's time. And the third was more recently, if I may say so, the Ratan Tata time. So that you can see not only that how this attribute has been practiced, but how it's been practiced consistently over 150 years. Harish, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think Percy, that's the way we thought about this book. Each of these pieces, Percy, and the chapters are on pioneering, on people, on progress, on persistence, principles, the use of profits with responsibility. These are the pieces which come through in the book. Okay, the thought was that any entrepreneur, any manager of today can imbibe even one of these pieces, not necessarily all of them, and take them into her or his life or her or his company. So the essay which underpins each such P, let's take perseverance or let's take people, the essay actually highlights what that P is all about, why that P is very important in the building of a business enterprise, and how that P can be made sustainable over a long period of time. And to Mr. Gopalakrishnan's credit, he also brought in perspectives from outside the Tata Group. So the essay is not just about the Tata Group. There are many other business groups, Unilever and many other business groups which are referred to. And you also see examples from them. But the stories are uniquely Tata. And these are real life stories which I think both speak to your head and speak to your heart at the same time. But as people read these stories, they get an understanding of the challenges that our leaders over 6 generations have faced in taking forward that specific P, but nonetheless, how they made sure that they stayed steadfast on that route. That's how we configured the book. I must, I cannot end without mentioning the postscript and a very interesting chapter, Percy, towards the end of the book, which is the perspectives and postscript chapter. So in one of those chapters, you will also find an imaginary discussion between 4 chairmen of the Tata Group. There is Jamsetji Tata, there is W.Z.C.C. Tata, there is Nauroji Saklatwala, and there is JRD Tata. And the 4 of them are involved in a discussion on what they feel about the Tata Group of today and how those philosophies have come forward. It's a very, very interesting chapter because it's imaginary conversation. Mr. Gopalakrishnan actually scripted the chapter, and I think it can become the subject of very interesting theatre in the future if someone wants to take that forward and create a theatrical version of it.
Yes, very true, very true.
I should add that I wrote the chapter, but I couldn't bring the Parsi-ness into it. In a family, how would you refer to Dikra and Kaka
But it's
and
very
all
nicely
that
put anyway.
So I took the help of Homi Khusru Khan, who I said, give it the Parsi twist, because they're not going to sit and talk they'll have the Parsi twist, obviously.
Naturally.
And so to make it sound a bit authentic,
But Gopal, let me ask you one more thing. That, Jamsetji Tata and his vision has taken the House of Tatas to become one of the most recognized group, not only in India but globally. They have been recognized as the largest philanthropic group in the world, plowing 66% of their profits for the welfare of the people in the countries they do business in. The concept has always been to do what is right, and they believe that what has come from the people must go back to the people. What is your opinion on the same? Shouldn't profit be plowed back into the business as a popular belief?
Of course, profit should be plowed back into the business. But I'm quoting from other philosophies so that my point is made better. Swami Vivekananda said, serve others before you serve yourself. And even Zarathustri principles, though I'm no expert on that, but one is not failed to be touched by some of the ideas, have come with the way Tata's thought about it. And they said, are the shareholders of Tata getting this money, which is the surplus after declaring dividend, after keeping money into the business, to become personally wealthy? And the fact that after a certain amount of wealth was acquired and after they had a nice bungalow, which is fair enough, I think there's nothing wrong with that, the rest of the amount, and the amounts were huge by those standards of time, huge, went into a trust for the benefit of the people. Zoroastrian Tata Trust, Sir Ratan Tata Trust, and I think there are 18 trusts in all. Now the late Ratan Tata, the current Ratan Tata, not the Sir Ratan Tata, has put his thing also into a trust, the RPEF, Ratan Tata Endowment Fund.
Endowment Fund, yeah.
Endowment Fund. Just demonstrates that Tatas were never seeking to be on the Hurun list of the world's richest. They never wanted to have a wedding. Of course, they didn't have that many daughters, but whatever sons or daughters they had, they didn't want to have a 10,000 rupee wedding, 10,000 crore wedding for their children. So they said, we've got what money we need. We are now comfortable. What about all the poor people in this country? And when I was hearing earlier the conversation between Aspi Minochar and a doctor, I forget his name, BP, it said, about... Sorry?
Behram Pastakia.
Behram Pastakia. I said, this is the essence of humanity. This is how, you don't need all of them to be Jamsetji Tata. You need a few Aspi Minochars, a few Behram Pastakias. And for God's sake, if we had 1 million of them, this country would be very, very different from what it is. So,
very true, very true.
That's the point that we wanted to illustrate. It sounds like we are all the time praising Tata, but we are only holding it as an example to have 1 million Tatas, 2 million Tatas. In 1910, when Alfred Marshall was the greatest economist in the world at that time, a young Bengali chap wrote to him and said, how can India progress? Remember, this is the peak of the British Raj. And he said, just get a couple of scores. Score was at number 20, as you remember. Get about 40 Tatas and nobody can stop you. And I think India is at that inflection point now.
Correct.
And they don't have to be Parsis or Tatas. They can be anybody who can be inspired by what
rightly so. Rightly
that
so.
is what we are trying to bring out, rather than to say that Tatas are perfect. It's not perfect. There are lots of imperfections in Tatas. But show me any human being who doesn't have imperfections, and
Yes.
And Percy, just to add to what Mr. Gopalakrishnan said, if for readers who wish to pick up this book, not all the stories in this book are stories of success. There are stories of key challenges. There are stories of, for instance, the story of Tata Finance, which is narrated here, or the story of Tata Shipping Line, which goes back to Jamsetji Tata's era. Readers will find some very, very interesting challenges that the Tata Group faced, which could have had huge reputational impact on the group as well. So, Mr. Gopalakrishnan is absolutely right. We don't claim that the Tata Group is perfect. But just going back to your point on profits being plowed back into the business, I just want to read out a quotation, which is Jamsetji Tata's speech in 1895 in the Empress Mills, where he puts forward his philosophy in very simple terms. He says, we do not claim to be more unselfish, more generous, or more philanthropic than other people. But we think we started on sound and straightforward business principles, considering the interests of the shareholders as our own, and the health and welfare of our employees, the sure foundation of our success.
Yes.
And employees in his mind also became the community and the nation in due course. So of course, as Tata Group companies, we are very, very proud of our financial performance, of our marketplace performance, and so forth. But I think the essential philosophy of Jamsetji Tata, that this wealth goes back to the people, is also foremost in our minds.
Very true. Harish, let me ask you a question. You have been a very passionate and successful author of several books, yet you continued as a marketing head in the Tata Group. What has been your experience in the years that you have served with the House of Tatas? And can you also briefly tell us some of your experiences in the group, pleasant and unpleasant? And also, please let us know if you have any golden opportunities or if you got any golden opportunities or breaks while serving in the company.
Yes, of course, Percy. I'll take your last question first. I think it was definitely a privilege to serve as the market. Definitely a privilege to be part of the leadership team which helped with the turnaround of the jewelry business and made it successful. Tanishq today is the largest and most successful brand of jewelry in the country. Certainly a privilege to nurture brands like Titan, help build brands like Fast Track. So all these, building some of these iconic brands have been big breaks that I've been given across my career. The sheer opportunity to be brand custodian of India's most valuable brand, Tata, and nurture it very carefully. Like Mr. Gopalakrishnan said, the very term brand custodian means you are custodian of something which has come a long way, and you have to nurture it and make it a little bit better for the future. So all those have been very, very big breaks that I have got, which I am very grateful to the Tata Group for. That's one response. The other is, Percy, have there been positives and have there been ups and downs? Of course, there have been. I think, I have helped build many successful brands, but I can also tell you of brands that we tried to build which did not work out. There are a couple of brands of tea that I tried to build in my very early years. Brahmaputra tea is an example. We didn't do too well with it. We had to withdraw the brand. And there have been many such instances. I was for a brief time involved with our telecom business, the consumer telecom business, Tata Indicom as it was called at that time. Once again, there were significant challenges in the marketplace and we could not achieve the kind of success that we wanted. So there have been ups and downs, of course, and there have been moments when I have felt elated, and there are also moments when I have felt that I have not done a good day's job. So there have been both, but I have learned that there is a need to be very persistent. And I've learned that every time we don't succeed, there is a need to go back to the customer, understand what the customer's needs are, go back to first principles, and then refashion your brand to serve those first principles.
Very true.
That's been a learning across my career. Keep the customer in front of you and do what the customer requires.
So my next question is to both of you, Gopal and Harish. When you work for a global powerhouse like the Tatas, what is your opinion of the code of conduct that Tatas very strictly follow? Don't you think that the Tata Group lost out on many businesses because of their insistence on following the code of conduct and not indulging in any unfair business practices? Other business houses may not agree to that, to the Tata principle. What is your opinion on this?
Go ahead, Harish.
So I would only want to say this, Percy, that I think the Tata Code of Conduct, in essence, what does it say? It emphasizes integrity. It emphasizes the need to do the right thing. And I would say that that is fundamental to any business or any brand which wants to sustain. Because if a brand does not have integrity, if a brand does not always do the right thing, it may prosper for a few years, but it is not going to sustain for the long term. People trust you. You have to earn the trust of all your stakeholders, the community, the customers, your employees, the bankers, your financial partners, distributors. You earn trust. You cannot demand trust. You have to earn trust. And you can only earn trust on the basis of integrity. And in the short term, brands may prosper by doing all kinds of things. But in the long term, integrity is the only way to earn the trust of your stakeholders. Which is why I am so happy that the Tata Group has a very, very well-defined Tata Code of Conduct. It's been there all the while since Jamsetji Tata's time. I was reading the 25th year annual 25th year report of Empress Mills, where integrity is emphasized at that time as well. But then it got codified as the Tata Code of Conduct when Mr. Ratan Tata was chairman. All of us are signatories to it. And I'm so happy that the Tata Group takes a very, very firm and serious view of this. Has the group lost opportunities? Perhaps yes. There are examples. I'm not going to quote specific examples here, but there are examples that we have come across where the group may have lost out. And JRD Tata himself has said that we may have lost out on opportunities, but that is the only way he would like the Tata Group to go, because that is the foundation of the group. So that's my response. But Mr. Gopalakrishnan, over to you.
Well, I want to add something rather than explain the same thing in a different way. And I'm putting my words to fit. If I look at it from a management point of view, management education and the Western management model emphasizes very much intelligence quotient. You must be smart, you must be knowledgeable, you must progress in your career. And indeed, in the first 10, 15 years of your career, when you're age until the age of 35, 40, acquiring more knowledge through attending courses, through self-taught learning, etc. When you start to lead a group of people, you realize that emotional quotient is very important. And thanks to Daniel Goleman and so on in the last 30, 40 years, that has become a subject of great pedagogy in American Harvards and Stanfords of the world. And that has filtered into all sorts of others. In the last 20 years, thanks to the world changing so fast, IQ and EQ, a third layer has come on top, which is AQ, the adaptability quotient. Artificial intelligence is coming, quantum computing is coming, let everybody change and learn to adapt. So these three are part of the pedagogy and the vocabulary of American MBA teaching, and they have spread around the world. But I'm using my own imagination. What Jamsetji brought, and that is very distinctive, is SQ, spirituality quotient. And I'm not using the word spirituality in a religious sense. Because I don't know about Zoroastrianism or Hinduism. That's not my point. Humanism. That there is something called right and wrong, and you must do the right thing at the right time. And there are many examples in the book. And I'm very hung up on this, if I may say so, because spirituality is something that I have no evidence from the records that are available, and who am I to comment on whether Jamsetji Tata was a religious person? But there is no evidence that I have come across that he went to the fire temple every Sunday or Monday or did this or that. He was generous, he supported many things, but he was a very spiritual person. If you are defined spiritual as a humane person, as a person who took humanity into account, he is definitely spiritual. Maybe he was religious also, but that's not for me to, I have not come across that. And it is that spirituality that management is lacking in the Western education. In fact, I'm going next month to the Global Peter Drucker Forum to talk about this, because all the management academics get together in the Drucker Forum. And I want to say what is missing in Western management education. You may call it sustainable, humane, enlightened, you can call it spiritual, give it any other name you want. But it is definitely not religious, because it doesn't matter whether you're a Christian or a Muslim or a Hindu or a Buddhist company, but bringing humanity back. While we have globalized trade, we have globalized technology, we have globalized education, we have failed hopelessly in globalizing compassion. And I think Jamsetji Tata is a great example of the opportunity, without his ever intending to do so, by the way, of globalizing compassion. And I would like to see in the next 30, 40 years, when many of us won't be around, if my grandchildren can say we have globalized compassion, that would be a wonderful inheritance that we would have taken from Jamsetji Tata.
Yeah, thank you, Gopal. I think I will follow up on that. You advocate that most successful companies have the letter SHE, sustainable, human, and enlightened concept. Can you please elaborate and give us your opinion why you feel that companies should follow the SHE code?
Well, for the reason that we have just been discussing all this while, and Tata is not the only she code company. I have no competence, so I didn't write. But if you can include Godrej, you can include Mahindra, you could perhaps include Birla. I don't know. There could be many other companies. But what I got interested in is, can I just like if you want to spot good cricketing talent, you must look at people who are younger and groom them to become first class players or test players. Could I spot companies who could have the potential to become she, rather than Tata and Godrej and Birla, which have been established she companies? And I therefore did an exercise a few years ago of taking companies which did not exist when I began my career, right? That means they didn't exist 50 years ago. HDFC, Kotak, Marico, Biocon. And I try to identify what are the characteristics these companies have, which makes them promising she companies, which gives them the possibility, no guarantee, that they will exist after 100 years. And that came together in 6 books that I wrote. I think it's very important for people to spot talent of she companies and nurture it, just like you do for good cricketers or good, managers in a company or good academics in a university. So I think the she is a much bigger subject, and the Western concept of management leadership is very masculine. Deep blue eyes, square jaw, giving out orders to everybody. I think the side advantage, that never my intention, is she gives it a little bit of feminism, and for the benefit, for the good of it.
But I just heard Harish say that the company should have integrity, do business with integrity, and I'm very glad to inform you that our logo, World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce logo, carries the word industry with integrity.
Right.
So I think that is the concept on which we would like to develop our younger generation. But coming to the next question, which is for both of you, following the demise of Mr. Ratan Tata, Mr. Noel Tata has taken over as chairman of the Tata Trust. He has been waiting in the wings for a substantial amount of time whilst doing a phenomenal job at Trent. His children, Leah, Maya, and Neville, are also in the business nowadays. So, how important is it for a Tata to be at the helm of affairs and lead the group?
So, Percy, let me try to address that question. I believe from the times of Jamsetji Tata, the Tata Group has been a very, very professionally run organization. There have been chairmen from the Tata family. There have been chairmen from outside the Tata family as well. The Tata Trusts were founded by Jamsetji Tata and his sons. And it's wonderful to see that Mr. Noel Tata has now been appointed as the chairman of the Tata Trust, taking forward that long family tradition. I also know his children who work in different Tata companies, and they're contributing wonderfully well to the progress of their specific roles. But when you come to individual companies of the Tata Group, I think they are very, very professionally managed. Professionals drawn from all parts of society with their various diverse skills. And this goes back to the times of Jamsetji Tata actually. While Jamsetji Tata was chairman of the group, but the person who led Empress Mills, his first greenfield enterprise, after a few years after Jamsetji Tata moved away from Nagpur, was Besonji Mehta, who was not connected to the Tata family at all, but was a professional who was recruited into the group. At the same time, Jamsetji Tata was also assisted by R.D. Tata, by W.Z.C.C. Tata, but at the same time, he also had, to set up the Indian Institute of Science. He had once again a professional who helped him to do that. So I always look at the Tata Group as a very professional group. But we are also very proud that Mr. Noel Tata has been appointed as chairman of the Tata Trust. I think the Tata Sons, which is the parent holding company of the companies, the Tata Trusts, and then the individual Tata companies, together somewhere in the minds of consumers and other stakeholders, constitute what Tata is.
Yeah, so the philosophy has been right man for the right job. according to
I think the Tatas have always looked at the right man for the right job. This is, I don't want to take time now. I know we are running out of time, but the story of Bezonji Mehta, for instance, is a very inspiring story, as is the story of Sumant Mulgaonkar, as is the story of Mr. N. Chandrasekharan, as is the story of Ratan Tata, as is the story of Noel Tata. So you find the right man for the right job, I think, is what has been in place ever since Jamsetji Tata's time. But Mr. Gopalakrishnan, over to you.
No, I think you said what is to be said. I'm giving you my personal perception.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not entirely based on my ideas. It's based on what even I've heard Ratan Tata say. Tata's is not a Zoroastrian company. It's a company built on Zoroastrian values.
Correct. Very
That's
good.
a big difference.
Yes, yes.
And anybody can practice Zoroastrian values because they're not different from Hindu values or, any other values, spiritual values. And so in Tata's, Ratan Tata himself has said that I'll choose the most competent and culturally compatible person rather than focus on his religion of his birth. And
I think that has been the success of the group here.
That has been the philosophy, and I think whether Noel Tata is a Parsi or not, whether he's had a Navjot or not, doesn't occupy our minds. It may occupy the minds of the Parsi Panchayat, but we don't think about it.
Exactly.
And Percy, I want to also mention one thing. As I've been researching for this book, what I also find is a lot of the leadership recruited by the Tata Group ever since Jamsetji Tata's time has always focused on recruiting or getting the right person based on the attitude of the person.
Yes.
And training the person for skills. Bezonji Mehta, who was perhaps the first professional to join the Tata Group, was a ticket inspector at the Baikula railway station, and then he became station master in his later days. But Jamsetji Tata found the right blend of common sense, integrity, working with people in getting him into the group, and that's why he did an extraordinary job of the Empress Mills. And you will find that of all professionals, many professionals who have been with the group become iconic leaders. I think you find the same thing.
So as we come closer to our discussion, this also question is for both of you. Can you briefly give your take on the late Ratan Tata's legacy and how will it be taken forward in the future?
I think Mr. Gopalakrishnan has had the unique privilege of working closely with him, so I'm going to request him to answer this.
Sit on to him.
Well, I can say so much, but I shouldn't because time is limited. For 17, 18 years, every morning, either you met him at a board meeting or at a lunch table or wherever. I will remember Ratan Tata for his humanity and his humility, and only second for his business accomplishments. His business accomplishments are known in the public domain to be enormous. So what I'm saying about his humanity and his humility comes ahead of that. I've seen many leaders or read about many leaders who have superb business accomplishments. But I've seen very few who combine that with humanity and humility. I could tell you stories, but this is not the time for it. But there are wonderful stories that Harish and I can recount, but that will require another session.
Yeah, I think we may arrange one.
We shan't go into now. But believe me, I always like to think of him as the person rather than the business leader, though both are huge accomplishments. And you cannot say that for too many business leaders, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you for that good word.
So Percy, I will remember Mr. Ratan Tata fondly. He was the chairman of the Tata Group for much of my career within the group. Of course, his business accomplishments and his accomplishments on the social side as the chairman of the Tata Trust are well known to all of us, so I'll not spend time on them here. But I will remember him for a person who always focused on doing the right thing.
Yes, correct.
In situations which were very challenging, in situations which posed significant dilemmas, I think I will remember him as the person who always focused on doing the right thing. And, I've read one of his interviews where he's asked, what would you like to be remembered as? What is the one of the legacies you'd like to leave behind? And he has said, I hope in my life I've always done the right thing. That's the way I would remember him.
I think that is very well put, because I think he acted tough when he had to take a right decision, irrespective of its consequences. That was the hallmark of the man. Just one of the last questions, that our Zoroastrian community has produced many good businessmen, philanthropists, professionals in all fields of life. But recently we are not doing as well as we should be doing. And when I asked a question last time to Mr. Gopal Krishnan, he said we need to be ancestors and not inheritors. So can you elaborate on it so that probably the audience can know what you really mean by that?
I think what it means is fairly obvious, because we know in every business family, one person makes the money, the second person takes it forward, the third person gets soft, and the fourth person may either get derelict or lazy. That's not special to Zoroastrians or to Hindus or anybody else. And it is not for me to comment about youngsters, but when I see my friend Philly Kharas struggling with a number of Zoroastrian youngsters whom he tries very hard to, along with the other members of the W.Z.C.C, to get into entrepreneurship, to get into building businesses, the thought passed my mind that have we reached that generation, third or fourth generation, when we are content to be great inheritors and failing to become great ancestors? And that's the context in which I made a comment. I make it respectfully, not as a criticism.
No, I know it. It is a very nice comment.
But if it tricks somebody and sounds like a criticism, I don't mind it.
No, we have to encourage our youngsters. So I think
exactly.
they need to understand the concept.
That's my point. Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, very good. So one of the last questions now. Gopal, you seem to be also a very good sportsman, I believe. You play tennis regularly at Bombay Gym with our very young member, Philly Kharas. So can you just very briefly tell us who is good in forehand or backhand, or who serves better, perhaps?
Who meaning between Philly and me?
Yes.
Well, I've seen Philly for the last, 50 years, 40 years. And he is such an elegant player. I never aspired to be anywhere near him.
Oh, very good.
He's a Loughborough University blue, which I am not. And his footwork and his precision belie his age. Philly is a wonderful human being. He's a wonderful tennis player. And he eats the same breakfast for the last 50 years. 2 fried eggs, side-cut toast with marmalade. I've never met such a guy. Philly, over to you.
Yeah. So, Harish, do you have any sporting things to say?
Yes. I used to be a leg spinner with the cricket team of Tata team many years ago, and cricket keeps me preoccupied until today. And I'm very active. I love walking. I think walking gives me the ability to think as well. But the other passion, since Mr. Gopalakrishnan referred to breakfasts of fried eggs and marmalade and bread, I'm also a big foodie, Percy. I love food. And very recently, one of my senior colleagues hosted me at the Ribbon Club in Mumbai.
Yeah.
And I had a puri on toast, and then I had mutton pulao, and I had dhansak, and I had bhaji dana.
Were you able to walk after that?
Very slowly, very slowly. Very slowly I was able to walk, but that was a wonderful Parsi meal, and what a wonderful club it is. Mr. Gopalakrishnan had already described
very
it. Very
antique and very old-fashioned.
Yes, so when I got,
in Ripon Club, all the the lawyer fraternity used to come there to have lunch every day and discuss all the cases and everything like that, and then go to sleep on those easy chairs which were there.
And Mr. Gopalakrishnan, when he began thinking about this book, maybe he should talk about it. He actually took a walk from Jamsetji Tata's house to the Ribbon Club. Mr. Gopalakrishnan, maybe you should narrate that anecdote.
No, that's all right. I mean, it was just to relive the times. I went to Navsari, where his birthplace is. I went to where he is buried in Woking in Surrey. I went to where JRD and his family are buried in Père Lachaise in Paris. So
these are all good stories to remember, and
they're nice little stories that you just absorb the atmosphere.
So in the end, thank you very much, Gopal and Harish, for spending your time with us and answering all the questions so boldly and nicely. So we have all enjoyed your interaction very much. I'm sure everybody else has also done that. And this is a recording which we will also circulate to all our members who have not been able to attend. And I can now hand over to Karishma to give us synthesis. Karishma? Right, okay.
In today's event that we have just witnessed, I would like to give gratitude to all the contributors for shining the spotlight on Jamsetji Tata, an Ayurved, a priest of the Zoroastrian community, and a person who took the mission of the Zoroastrian faith as enlightened by the Prophet Zarathustra forward, which is to share the knowledge in the Zoroastrian faith with all people. And this is key. In the verse 33.1 of the Zoroastrian faith and 31.3, there's clear indication that the knowledge needs to be shared with Vispa Javantu, all people. In the words of Jamsetji Tata, Erva Jamsetji Tata, it says, in a free enterprise, the community is not just another stakeholder in the business, but it is in fact the very purpose of its existence. In a letter from Jamsetji Tata to Swami Vivekananda, he describes a kind of ascetic spirit where a person would devote their life to the cultivation of the sciences. And he defines this natural and humanistic. In his own words, he states, I am of the opinion that if such a crusade in favor of asceticism of this kind were undertaken by a competent leader, it would greatly help asceticism, science, and the good name of our common country. And I do not know who would make a more fitting general of such a campaign than Vivekananda. The common country has now gone on to be the whole world. Competent leaders have been grown, nurtured, and empowered to make other such competent leaders, such that the power within each person, with the W.Z.C.C principles of integrity and industry, have grown worldwide. The idea of power, in the words of Jamsetji Tata, were we must harness this water. This was in reference to the water he saw on the Roha Creek. We must harness this water. We must turn it into power. Now, if you replace the word water by ideas and knowledge, replace the word water by the good in people and societies and the communities he grew wherever he went, whether it was the building of the Jamsetji city, the Jamshedpur city, the Tata Motors, the Vashi power plant, the hydroelectric power, the cars of today in Tata Motors, the trucks which run the country of India, and so much more. What you will see is, as we think of all that we've heard over the last hour and a half, from Harishji, from Gopalji, and from Percy Master, it is the growth of an ecosystem for sustainable development. And an ecosystem that continues to grow with the power within each person and each community and each project it nurtures, that grows through time, not just survives through time, but grows through time. The fundamental principles that were mentioned at the beginning of this webinar were that the W.Z.C.C, the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce, is built upon the overlap of the economic domain, the intellectual domain, and the social domain. And at the center of the overlap between these three values is the vision of the Fravashi, this and the center over here. And that is the spirit of the great divine power, not just energy. It is the power with a purpose, with a mission, with a vision, based upon the three ideas of, will do, good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. So a Fravashi is the guiding energy or power, which is common to the divine energy and common to every existence. There is a Fravashi in water, in stone, in people, in projects. Everything has a Fravashi, a guiding essence. Let's put this into the context of what was mentioned. The principles of Humata, Hukta, and Varshta. Good thoughts, good words, and good deeds. And I'm going to relate this to the spirit of the litany unto the fire within each one and in the mind, in the Gathas of Zarathustra, where these three principles, good thoughts, good words, and good deeds, are linked to the dedication of one's own breath, as my mum actually spoke to the Zoroastrian Youth Congress, the power of today and tomorrow, last year. This power that Zarathustra Sahib says is the devotion of one's every breath to the nurturing of all that is good, to good leadership, and to that common purpose that Jamsetji Tata embodies. In conclusion, the vision of Jamsetji Tata is a true Frasho Kereti, a progress through righteousness and action for the good of the whole world, which is based upon Mazda, wisdom, and Spenta Mainu, the beneficent mentality, as I see it, which is built with a good mind, good order, so Vahuman, order and purity Asha, good strength, Vahukshatra, for the good of all, which empowers Aramaiti, the noble mind, benevolence and devotion, in a holistic perfection, excellence, that sustains through time, Purvatat that leads to Ameritat. In conclusion, the work of the building of the Indian Institute of Science, where I spent 3 beautiful years, has now led to not just where I spent National Institute for Medical Research, TIFR, Tata Institute for Fundamental Research, then the National Center for Biological Sciences, and now the Life Science Cluster. So this growth continues. It's an enterprise, it's an industry based on what you've heard today. So with that, I'd like to move on to the question and answer section.
I think
your questions can be put in the chat.
You have to ask Philly to say thanks.
Yes, we will come to that, definitely, Percy. Thank you. So the first question in this series is a note from Rohinton and Roshan Rivetna. If you'd like to raise your hand, Yazdi will help you unmute. Rohinton and Roshan have helped start the W.Z.C.C. And Rohinton, Roshan? And they say, very inspiring. Both? Yes, they're here. Please go ahead.
Yes, I have a question about our startups. We are encouraging our young to get into business. What advice would you give them to follow in the footsteps of the Tata enterprise?
Shall I go, Harish?
Yeah.
I'll make it simple. Treat your startup like your child. Inculcate values, curiosity, and love into your startup. Instead of only looking for valuation, look for values. Look for valuation. I have nothing against it, by the way. I'm just setting the balance right. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another mention from Advocate Jamsetji Mistry. Now, Jamshed Mistry, if you've got something to help us shine the spotlight on Nasirvanji Tata, please raise your hand and ask your question. Motorola, thanks for such an inspiring topic and Tata's benevolence. Yes, Sam Bilimoria, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Gopal and Harish. That was a very, very interesting talk. My question is that I'm taking the other angle of it, and that is philanthropy. And from what I read from Sotheby's list, is that Jamsetji Tata legacy is the greatest in the world in terms of philanthropy, which is not emphasized in Western studies or in Western news. So he comes on top of all the philanthropists of $102 billion up to date. And second to him is Warren Buffett. So this is the thing I wanted to emphasize, that even over here in the West, he is considered the biggest philanthropy of all times. And secondly,
what is your question, Sam? What is your question to help Gopal and Harish shine the spotlight on Jamsetji Tata? What is your question?
Why is it so that he is not recognized as the greatest philanthropy of all times? Because this is something that is kind of...
Well,
thank you, Gopalji.
I just want to say this. I can only comment on what I've heard from Ratan Tata, because my association is the last 20 years. Ratan Tata said, if you have to do good things, do it, not for publicity, but for doing it. And when I joined Tata's, we didn't even get a copy of the Tata Trust's annual work. There was a statutory document which is required to be filed with the Charities Commissioner. It's only in the last, I would say, decade or maybe even less, that a formal report is being put out by the Tata Trust about the work they do. So I think there's a bit of the desire to be low profile. I agree with you that if you did a valuation, the Tata Trust is probably bigger than many of the other Western ones, and some people have cottoned on to it. But it's Tata's inherent shyness to talk about their trust activities, which may change in the course of time.
Thank you, Gopalji. Harish, do you have anything to add, or shall we move on to Edel?
I think Mr. Gopalakrishnan's answer covers it. I have nothing else to add to it.
Thank you. Edel, over to you, please.
Yeah, thank you very much for the very interesting talk. Just a comment and then a question. I belong to the Puchkanawala family, so my grandfather was the one who was involved with the startup of the central bank. And I've read his book, and I see a lot of connections between the central bank and the Tatas during the 20s and 30s. So I found that very, very, very interesting. The question that I would like to ask is that the Parsi companies such as Tata's, Godrej's, and Central Bank may not be now, but in the old days, accommodated a lot of Parsis with jobs. It was almost a sure bet. If you didn't have a job, you'd find it in them. Maybe the question is, do you think this intended charity or accommodation had some negative effect in making a whole generation of Parsis more complacent with reduced motivation?
Harish?
I'm really not competent to comment on that question. I have found the Parsi colleagues that I have worked with very enterprising, very sincere, very dedicated, doing very good work. That's the only comment I'd like to make. I do not have any further data to be able to comment on that question, Edel, but thank you for asking.
I don't want to add anything else except to say that I've always seen Parsis as entrepreneurs and not service people, not job seeking, but creators of jobs. Small, big, medium, whatever. So the thought even didn't pass my mind of what you're saying. That I think they become complacent as entrepreneurs. We've talked about it a few minutes ago with Percy. On jobs, are they complacent? I don't know. I can't tell. Maybe they are.
Thank you very much. We'll move over to Manik Bhujwala to help us continue to shine the spotlight on Erva Jamsetji Nasirvanji Tata. Manik.
Yes, thank you. Very wonderful presentation and question answers about Jamsetji and the Tata Group. I was wondering if the speakers have some comment about the way the Cyrus Mistry was removed from office. Was that a kind of
Manekji,
aberration
Manekji,
about the Tata policy?
Manekji, may I just stop you there? This is a spotlight from the WZCC solely on Jamsetji Nasirvanji Tata. If with due respect to you, we must your thoughts
But
on.
I just wanted to say if that was going against Jamsetji Tata's policy, or humanity and all that.
Your statement has been noted. We will move on to the next thought on J.N. Tata, and we'll take it from the chat group. So there is a comment about. Okay. So I'd like to bring the spotlight finally before I hand over to Karas for his vote of thanks to the comment by Rohinton and Roshan Rivetna. Very inspiring. Both the Tata story as well as the very erudite speakers. So I'd like to ask all three of our speakers, Percy Master, Gopal and Harishji, in reverse order, to give a final thought on J.N. Tata before the vote of thanks. Harishji.
Well, Jamsetji Tata has been and continues to remain a huge source of inspiration to us in the Tata Group and across the country. His philosophy of putting the community center stage and ensuring that industry contributes to the community and to the nation and not just to itself has been the guiding philosophy for so many of us over our years. And this is the philosophy which I think many entrepreneurs of today, many business leaders of today can pay heed to, because it is the best way to establish sustainable businesses for the future. That would be my comment, and my homage and respects to Jamsetji Tata, who established the Tata Group 156 years ago. And it's wonderful to see his philosophy living and breathing in the group every single day today. Thank you very much.
Very well put.
Thank you, Hari.
Thank you, Harishji.
A very noble idea which summarizes the concept of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the Indian theory. Gopalji, over to you, please.
Well, Alfred Marshall is dead and gone, but his statement of 1910 rings in my ears. If only India would have a score or two of Tatas. Allowing for the passage of time, inflation, I'm committing my time. I'm pushing 80, so I don't know how much time there is, but for the amount of time available, that India should have 2,000 Tatas of varying sizes, but people who run ethical, large businesses. And I hope Jamsetji Tata's Atma will get some satisfaction that his example has inspired. And if India gets 2,000 people like Tata, not of the same size, this country will be unstoppable. Thank you.
A final note to you, Percy, from you.
Thank you, Karishma. I want to thank both the speakers, Gopal and Harish, for this wonderful exchange that we had today. I think it was a great learning experience for our audience. And I always believe that you have not lived your life unless you have done something for someone else. And that should be the motto by which we should go ahead, and follow the example of Jamsetji Tata and the Tata Group, so that when you are a professional or an entrepreneur, please continue at least adopting part of their integrity. I think if we cannot be doing everything that Tata does, but even small thing if you do, it will help you in your business and your life.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. On that note, if we can come back to the idea that this webinar has been hosted by the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce Zoroastrian Education Network, let us think about what Jamsetji Tata has left us as a legacy. My mother has been a Tata scholar. I have been a scholar of the Tata Trust. This idea is for education to reach all. This is the overview from the Tata Trust on the J.N. Tata Trust Education Fund. And
It's
in
not
the
only
light,
for the past, yes.
correct, and in the light of this idea from Jamsetji Tata, that it must be the purpose of existence for the good of all, that the Tata Trust scholarships are truly meritocratic and for all. So on that note, may we please ask Mr. Philly Kharas, who introduced the W.Z.C.C to Mr. Gopalakrishnan and Harish Ji, to give a vote of thanks. Uncle Philly, over to you. We can't actually hear you yet, Uncle. Please unmute.
I think he is unmuted, but Philly, can you speak loudly and just see that your speaker is on? Increase the volume of your speaker.
Okay. Uncle Percy, could you do me a favor? Could you please phone Uncle Philly if this doesn't work? Allow his voice to come through your phone while we watch him so we can close on time and not stress him out too much. Uncle Philly, please don't worry. Percy is going to phone you. You'll speak to Percy. We will still hear you.
Yeah.
In that case, we will express our gratitude to Harish Ji and Gopal Ji and Uncle Philly and request Percy to give a vote of thanks.
Philly, can you hear us? How come he's not hearing? Is Yazdi on the line?
Yazdi will always be there.
I'm there, but
What is the problem with him? Can you
there's
find
some
out?
problem with his microphone.
Okay, Percy, if Uncle Philly comes back, we will definitely give him the chance to give his own vote of thanks. But with respect to all the people on this call and the people who will hear the recording, may I request you to please give your thanks briefly?
Yeah, no, it has been a fabulous, I think, exchange of ideas and words on this spotlight today. I'm sure everybody will benefit from the discussion that we have had. And I want to thank Mr. Gopal and Mr. Harish from the bottom of our heart for coming out and giving their precious time and exchanging their views. And I wish them all the best in their future books, which I'm sure they will publish. And probably we can have you again for some exchange in the future. I don't know. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Percy, for having us.
Thank you, Percy.
Thank you. It was wonderful.
Thanks to all of you for having us on this session.
We will open the floor in a minute, but before we do that, let us give gratitude to Mr. Yazdi Tata, who supports this webinar series from the World Zoroastrian Chamber of Commerce on Zoroastrians.net.